The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
What are some of the liabilities that Georgia will have to fulfill on its path to EU membership, and what does the new status of a candidate country give Georgia if granted? Georgi Sakadze will provide more details in his interview with Soso Dzamukashvili, who wrote a very interesting blog for Forbes Georgia recently.
Soso, many thanks for your time and quite interesting Forbes blog. The next issue, what you have published just 2 days ago. Tell us a bit more about possibilities creating for Georgia. I mean, it's more not just possibilities, it's opportunities, but whole world and especially Ukraine is paying a huge price for it. Where do we stand so far? And as a possible candidates of becoming the member of EU, how realistic is this? And could you be more specific in and precise at the same time to describe the timeline of the liabilities which should be fulfilled?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. And yes, when we start talking about the opportunities of Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, we shouldn't forget that all these three countries are associated members of the European Union. They have association agreements along with DCFTA and a visa-free regime, which means that these countries have been working towards integration within the European Union, and they have been taking several steps to implement specific reforms which have been outlined by the European Union. And this process started for Georgia in 2014 when we signed the association agreement with the EU. Throughout this process, since 2014, Georgia, as well as Moldova and Ukraine, got quite closer in terms of economy and administrative harmonization, let's say, because they signed these agreements. Especially, also, we could say that Georgia, along with these countries, are close politically, but unfortunately, in recent years, we saw democratic backsliding in Georgia, as well as several problems appearing in the judiciary system and in terms of media freedom. So these are the criteria which could be impeding Georgia towards this European integration. But also, we shouldn't forget that the quite high percentage of the Georgian population is willing to obtain EU membership, and it's been there since 2008 after the war with Russia, into August war with Russia, and which is one of the quite important factors in terms of European integration and becoming a member of the European Union.
Correct. So how can we describe, the difference between the status of associate member and candidate, which means that we do all understand that due to the war and absolutely crazy situation happening in the middle of Europe, Ukraine might definitely be the locomotive which will enter through the organization itself as a candidate and will assist also Moldova and Georgia to become a member of it. But at the same time, our viewers and followers should be in charge about the differentials of status of associate member and candidate. Where do we stand?
In terms of reforms, let's say, there shouldn't be that much difference but as it is declared by the European Union, association agreement is not alternative. It's not alternative to the membership. So basically, it's not the process which leads to ultimate membership. It's a program created by the European Union to promote democracy around the organization, around its member states, to promote prosperity, sustainable development, rule of law, human rights, LGBTQ plus rights, etc., etc. It's just to stabilize the neighboring regions around the organization. Because as we know, there is not only Eastern Partnership, countries which signed, some of them signed the association agreement, but there is also southern neighborhood, which is outside the European Union, outside European continent, and they don't really have any perspective in terms of geographic proximity, in terms of geographic location to become members of the European Union. So
I,
this,
I absolutely agree, but at the same time, just well, within the neighborhood of Georgia, we do have a sample or example of Republic of Turkey.
mhm.
They fulfilled the candidate. Applicancy just I don't know, more than 10 years ago, yeah, or even more.
More around 50 years ago. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, so absolutely. I'm talking about 40 years ago when they
Yes.
fulfilled, and finally, what do we have is there still the status is candidate.
Hmm.
So when you are mentioning about infrastructure, economic, and political decisions and criteria through these 35 chapters, if correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
does that mean that political is the most essential for the final decisions within 27 members of EU? And Turkey is right today's good example for Georgia to understand the realistic route for being
Yes.
the full member of the EU.
We could say that democratic factors, well, officially it's one of the most important ones. But of course, if country is closer with the EU, but at the same time it's not really democratic, it could be a hindering factor in terms of integration. But nevertheless, we shouldn't forget that Georgia and Moldova, as well as Ukraine, they had to take specific steps and deliver some results to the European Union to obtain these steps to politically integrate, to economically integrate, and to have other benefits such as DCFTA and visa-free regime. So we could not really say that all these factors, I think, are entwined, because if you don't deliver one, you don't get another one. So I would say democracy is important, as long as the countries do not maintain the level, the quality of democracy. They started EU integration process. For instance, in Georgia, Georgia used to be more democratic. The quality of democracy in Georgia was higher in the beginning of the decade probably 2010s, because in 2012 we had democratic elections, unprecedented democratic elections, which was an important factor in solidifying the quality of democracy in Georgia. But nowadays, what we see is that is democratic backsliding. But we are closer to the EU in terms of economic and administrative
Administrative.
system. Yes. So it's just about maintenance of the level. And as we see in Turkey, there is also huge democratic backsliding. The government makes some anti-human rights decisions, which is a red line for the European Union to just continue this process. But also there is another factor of geographic issue, which is Turkey bordering the countries such as Syria and other Middle Eastern countries where the security problems arise from time to time. So the European Union probably is not really ready to talk about Turkey's membership in terms of that.
So my final question is regarding the timeline and taking into consideration emotional side of the Georgian
Yeah.
society. They are always in a hurry. Now we are all here happy for the opportunity being a candidate, which is like due to the situation 2 years before. Well, at least to have a chance to
Yes.
become a candidate. Tell me about the timeline. Timeline how of after being a candidate. What is, from your perspective, at least the minimum period which Georgia might need, taking into consideration the current condition of those three directions, what you have mentioned: economic, administrative, and political. Please go ahead.
Yes. I would say that of course, it depends on the democratic reforms the government will try to implement, and this is a big question actually to ask. But on average, we could say that it could last around 10 years or more. It's informal number. Let's say when you say that we are applying for candidate status you will wait for 10 years, so they will answer you. But of course, it definitely depends on these countries, how fast they will implement these reforms. Maybe Ukraine will do it faster than Georgia, and it doesn't make all these countries to do everything together, because all these countries will take these steps separately, independently, along with the European Union. So there is no clear answer to that, I would say, but it's a long process, definitely.
So thank you so much for your time and for very interesting conversation. I hope to see you soon, and let's get together in the near years to talk a bit more about EU and Georgia's possible membership. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.